All right, I think we're ready. So let's jump in and get started. Is everybody ready? All right, everybody's ready. All right, thank you, Ashley, for the thumbs up. Um, there. All right, so now let's get started, and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Natalie Peacock, who is our partner with the Southwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. She is going to showcase a few of the strategies for building a practice for educator wellness and trauma-informed classrooms and campuses that are embedded in the building a practice to support educator wellness and trauma informed classrooms and campuses training. And this is a training that was developed by our AWARE partners. All right. So Dr. Peacock, I am handing it over to you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to TEA's December webinar. My name is Dr. Natalie Peacock, and I'm excited to spend a few minutes with you at the beginning of our training or this webinar talking to you about a training that was developed specifically for Texas educators. The name of the training is Building a Practice to Support Educator Wellness and Trauma-Informed Classrooms and Campuses. And we've created a trainer of trainer opportunity that our school leaders from across the state can become trainers from their ESCs. So you can go back to your campuses and train your staff. So what I'm going to do this morning is talk a little bit about some of the strategies that you'll learn in this training, as well as talk to you about how you can become trained by your education service center. And Ashton, I'm going to ask you to interrupt me at any time if there are specific questions that maybe I need to pause and answer along the way.
Yes, ma'am.
And we'll get started. Thank you. So a quick overview of who I am and where I work. My name is Natalie Peacock. I live here in Texas, and I'm a longtime Texas educator. Have worked with many of you. I see some familiar names in our participants. But I work for the MHTTC, which is the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. We are a SAMHSA-funded, federally funded entity that actually sits at the University of Texas in Austin. As you can see, the whole country is divided into 10 MHTTCs, and our specific region is right here on the screen. We support Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and New Mexico by providing technical assistance, creating resources, training, and meeting with state education agency leaders to support the workforce of school mental health. So what I'm going to be showcasing today is just one of the projects that we have worked on and that's spreading across Texas. And then when I close, I'm going to offer some more opportunities that are available for you all that we have coming up soon. Everything that we do is free of charge, so that's important for you to know. And I'm excited to get started. So anytime we do a training with the MHTTC, the Southwest MHTTC, this is how we want to show up. And this is truly a trauma-informed lens of providing support for our workforce. We want to be sure that we are respectful, clear, and understandable. We're inviting to individuals participating in their own journeys. We come from with an approach of healing-centered and trauma responsiveness. And the things that we do are strength-based and hopeful. So hopefully this image right here, you're familiar with. I know earlier Tammy mentioned about the Texas School Mental Health website. This is one of the key frameworks of all the work that happens in the Texas school mental health space. And I have this circled, or I have this image on here to show you that we're going to be talking about this black circle around this cloud of grief-informed and trauma-informed practices. And when we as a school work with a grief-informed and trauma-informed lens or practice or program, we're actually working in all of these other blue circles. So we are supporting positive youth development, we're supporting suicide prevention, intervention, postvention, early mental health prevention, intervention, positive behavior intervention and supports, building relationships, managing emotions and decision-making skills, promoting positive, safe, and supportive school climate. And we're also down here on the bottom with this path, working through mental health promotion and prevention and early identification and screening. I put this on here just to show you that when we think about really creating a space in our campus, in our classrooms, and in our school districts that is grief informed and trauma informed, it's not just a check the box. It's not just a training that we attend. That is the first part of creating that space, but we're actually doing all of these other things at the same time. So, what we've created with this training and with the panel that you'll hear when I finish up, is we've got some school districts and education service centers who are doing a lot of this work, who have been trained in this, and they're taking it even to the next level to create trauma informed classrooms and campuses. So this training is actually divided into two sessions. The first session that we wanted to be sure that we trained on and supported is educator wellness. So I'm going to walk you through some of the slides from the training and talk about some of these strategies before we look at the second part of the training. So let's dive in. This training starts out with really showcasing why it's important that we do this work. It talks about the clearinghouse and where we can learn more about what continuing education looks like for educators and where trauma informed practices live. As you know, several legislative sessions ago, Senate Bill 11 and House Bill 18 now require that annually our schools are trained in trauma and grief informed practices. And that's where this training was birthed from. So that's why we do it. And now let's talk about, let's move into some of the slides from the educator wellness training. Just to highlight, the training is 60 to 90 minutes for this section. And so these are the topics that are talked about during this training. We take a deep dive into what the definition of trauma is. We talk about how trauma can affect our wellness as educators. We provide ways that schools can address educator wellness. We then go into SMART, which is stress management and resiliency strategies, which is an evidence-based training on how we can manage our stress. And then we talk about some specific skills and strategies for resetting and recharging. And then the educators actually get a chance to plan and walk through a wellness planning tool. So some of the definitions from the educator wellness training that we talk about are, what are adverse childhood experiences? How does that affect us as an educator? We walk through the difference between acute trauma, chronic trauma, complex trauma, vicarious trauma, and what toxic stress could look like for us on our campuses. Pretty deep definitions that with this training, there's a workbook that participants are able to write notes and create kind of action plans, action steps for or what that will look like in their classrooms. Then we talk about Dan Siegel's model with the hand model of the brain. And we specifically talk about what it means when we flip our lid with our prefrontal cortex, cerebral cortex, and our limbic regions, and what happens when we feel overwhelmed and stressed. Then we walk through a definition of what wellness is. A lot of times there's many ways that educator wellness or self-care can be described, but we really look at the definition that's provided from SAMHSA, which is, as Tammy mentioned and I mentioned, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Association. And so we talk about the 8 dimensions of wellness and where, as educators, we might feel burnout, overwhelmed, or stressed. And we learn about what each of those dimensions are in this training. Then we take some time to talk during this training about what we do to take time for self-care and wellness. So I'd like for us to just take a moment. We have about 230 people here, for you to just take the chat box, go into the chat box and type, what do you do to take time for yourself, your own self-care and wellness? What are some things that you do? I'm going to pull up the chat and read: travel, exercise, workout, read, walk, pray, meditate, yoga, Nintendo Smash Brothers, meditate, breathe, gardening. Oh, wonderful. Work in the garden, listen to music. Thank y'all for doing that. Yeah, so I'm glad that we've got some strategies just right at our fingertips. Next question that's a part of this training I'd like to just learn more from you all about is what gets in the way of you taking time for self-care and wellness? What gets in the way? What is the roadblock for you? Life, to-do list, obligations, work schedule, family, a never-ending to-do list, responsibilities, schedule, commitments, mom, wife responsibilities, taking care of others, time. Yeah. So, one of the, just as a quick aside, one of the most powerful things about these two questions in particular, in the training, we create a T chart of how we take care of ourselves, what gets in the way. And when we can take a moment to just reflect on that and see like, oh, I'm not the only person who struggles with finding time to do this. Oh, that's a really good idea and something I might consider for taking care of myself. It's a great way that moves into the next part of the training. Then what we take a look at is what's already been done. Um, uh, Previous to me being at the MHTTC, I spent some time on at the Texas Education Agency right at the beginning of the pandemic, and we created this document. We created a document in how educators and schools can create a multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS, to address educator wellness. I'm always surprised at how many people have not seen this document, but now you've got the QR code, and I'll drop it in the chat box for you shortly for you to take a look at this. We've got some school districts who are using this document very well, and they've actually created MTSS just to address educator wellness. Then we talk about an MTSS team. What is it? How can an MTSS team address educator wellness? A lot of times we've got a lot of schools across our state who are just figuring out RTI, and we've got a lot who are transitioning to MTSS. And a lot of times when we think about MTSS, we think about a student's academic needs. We really need to be thinking about a student's mental health needs, their behavior needs, and we should be thinking about our educators' wellness needs through a lens of an MTSS. So this training walks you through that. One of the things that we suggest doing is really putting things on the calendar to start thinking about how we can address educator wellness. Everything from using data to inform what training might be helpful, um, providing opportunities to innovate and reflect as a team, selecting and planning training that supports the well-being of educators annually. I personally believe that personal development precedes professional development, and we have to take time to make sure we're pouring into our educators and we're learning about who we are and how we can manage our stress. The
Hey,
next part
Dr.
of the training,
I'm sorry,
yes,
Dr.
go
Nat.
ahead,
We
Ashley.
have a quick question in the chat. If
Sure.
you could go to the previous slide, I believe maybe the educator wellness document to just talk a little bit more about, I'm sorry, the slide after that on MTSS.
This one?
Yes, so to talk a little bit about what that could look like for educator wellness. This is one of the questions in the
Yeah. So there, I mean, we could actually spend probably an hour just on that. Um, what I want to highlight is in this document right here, this is actually a 13-page document that walks through that process. So the first part in supporting educator wellness is assessing. And so this document goes through some evidence-based assessment tools to really understand what the needs are, how stressed and overwhelmed are our educators, using a tool called the ProQual, PROQOL, which is actually a part of this overall big training too. And then we think about the three tiers. Okay, what is something that we should be doing for all of our educators? What are some things that we could do? Do we need a Zen den or a place on our campus where teachers could go and recharge and refresh, where we've got coffee and we've got water and we've got um, a dimly lit room with music? Do we need to think differently about how um, breaks happen, or who's on duty each day? Or do we provide rewards where teachers maybe have coverage for their class and they can leave a little bit early? Just as like high level examples off the top of my head. Tier two would be for some, right? Do we need to facilitate a group? I know that there are some campuses who are partnering with local mental health agencies and providing a group counseling sessions for their staff. And when we think about tier one, that's for few, right? What do we need to do for those few to address their needs? And that might be one-on-one counseling, one-on-one wellness supports, things like that. And I'd be interested because we've got a lot of educators in here. A lot of educators in here probably are doing a lot of things. So I'd be interested to hear what is happening. And I hope that answered the question. I will just say that this document can really provide more detailed insight about that. Then through this educator wellness training, we walk through 3 evidence-based ways that we can manage our stress. And we go through some gratitude exercises, some kindness exercises, and some mindful presence exercises. Just to highlight a few things that we can do that are a part of the larger training, things that we can do that are, these are probably not rocket science and definitely things that we probably know about, but we have to schedule that time for rest. If we don't take the time to take care of ourselves, our body will let us know whenever we need to. We need to be able to recognize when we're feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. Modeling good working practices and self-care to encourage a healthy work-life balance, such as not being a status symbol to be the last car that leaves the parking lot, and not answering emails at 2 a.m. Communicating clearly to address what your needs are. That takes authenticity and vulnerability. Encouraging a sense of community among staff. So creating that community, I saw in the chat box a moment ago about the Sunshine Club, and then providing opportunities to connect. I do know, because most of my colleagues and friends are educators, it feels like after Thanksgiving, things get really wild before the holiday break. And a lot of schools are doing a lot of things to motivate staff with the 12 days of holidays, or whatever your school may call that. And then we have several check-ins. So within this training, I want to highlight that there's a lot of discussion. It's really about building community and working together and talking about ways that we all can support one another. We also highlight some exemplar school districts in the state who are doing this work very well, so that we have something that we can strive for. And then we close out this training by allowing our educators to build a self-care action plan and what can be done to support ourselves and watch out and take care of one another. And we close out again with Brene Brown's quote about talking to ourselves the way that we would talk to someone that we love. There's a lot of self-compassion and compassion work built into this 60 to 90-minute training. I'm seeing a couple things in the chat box, and just to kind of remind anyone who came in late, I'm just highlighting some of the training opportunity that your Education Service Center can train you on free of charge to address the trauma and grief informed practices requirement. And again, there's 2 parts to it. The first is educator wellness, and the second is trauma informed classrooms and campuses. So let's move into the second part of the training. And this training is also a 60 to 90-minute training, highly interactive with
Dr.
action planning. Yes.
I'm sorry. Quick question again. I'm sorry.
Sure. No problem.
Right before you wrapped up the piece about educator wellness, we had a question about what could it look like to get administrator buy-in to implement some of those strategies around educator wellness. So in other words, what can we do to advocate for ourselves to get administrator buy-in to be able to utilize some of those strategies?
Well, I would say, a lot of our leaders like data. And so is there any data that we can pull about teacher retention or teacher burnout using the ProQual? Is there any data we can pull about subs? Like, do we have a lot of high turnover of classrooms who are not being covered with subs? I've also heard, so getting that buy-in, I guess I would say data speaks. I'm imagining that our panel after me may have something to also say about this. I also have heard of schools, gosh, my leader really understands that we need to be doing this, but there's no money. right? And so maybe there's an education foundation grant, or maybe we could get our parent teacher organizations to pitch in. I would say that your education service centers, who we get to work very closely with, are full of ideas on how to support your unique schools and your unique districts. Because each of our ESCs, their catchment area supports very different types of schools from rural to urban. Um, so reach out. You can also reach out to me. I'm happy to jump on a brainstorming call with you about what might be helpful for you. But the core of that, I believe, is data. And then a lot of times, having been a campus and district level leader, it's easy when there are so many decisions that are made by our leaders. When we can go in with a problem, a solution at the same time, usually that is helpful. That's been my experience anyways. Is that helpful, Ashton?
Yes, ma'am, that was very helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. So I want to quickly move into the second part of this training, which is all about trauma-informed campuses and classroom strategies. So again, with this training, we start with definitions, like what is trauma? How does trauma affect our students and our families? What can schools do to address trauma? And what are some strategies we can put in place? Again, this is a very, it's called, let me look at the chat box, ProQual, Therese. And I will put some information when I finish up about that as well. So this is a very discussion-driven training, and it's a training where when you leave, you actually have a plan on what you might try in your classroom and on your campus. So we talk about the importance of community and circle of support and supporting one another to be trauma-informed and grief-informed. We then move into some more definitions that some may be reminders from our previous training, but from the lens of a classroom. So we look at the definition of acute trauma, adverse childhood experiences, chronic trauma, complex trauma, toxic stress, vicarious trauma. But then we look at a strengths-based perspective, which are PACEs. And PACEs are protective and compensatory experiences. And these are the things that we consider when there is someone who's experienced an adversity. There are things that we can put in place to protect that and to kind of build that bridge and start healing. And we know from research that it only takes one caring adult to help to work through and process some of that with our students. Then we move into talking about the impact of trauma on students from an academic lens, a behavioral lens, and an emotional lens, a mental health lens. So we know that when students have experienced trauma, oftentimes there are developmental delays, they're referred for services, they're more likely to drop out, they're more likely to be absent, decrease in reading ability, processing deficits, and oftentimes delays in expressive and receptive language. We talk about the impact of trauma behaviorally. We might see depressive symptoms, anxiety, difficulties with attention, higher rates of office referrals, and also a decreased ability to do these things: focus, recall, organize, and plan. And then we think about the physical part of how trauma can show up. Things that we might see are headaches and stomach aches, difficulty sleeping or eating, aches and pains that make it difficult to interact with others. So as a teacher, I would imagine all of us have experienced this or seen this with some of our students. In this training, we actually take a moment to think of a student. So for this exercise, we ask participants to think of a student who you've supported in some time in your career, maybe currently or in the past, that you knew that something was going on, but you maybe couldn't put your finger on it, or maybe you could. And throughout this training, you think about that student as we learn about strategies. We also in this training talk about the 4 R's. So realizing the widespread impact of trauma, recognizing the signs and symptoms, we respond to into all facets of the system, and we resist re-traumatization for the occurrence of unnecessary triggers. Part of this training also goes back to thinking about specifically what has happened in your school community that could have been traumatic. Texas is huge. I mean, we have natural disasters that happen across our state that could be characterized as a traumatic event, such as a tornado, a hurricane, a fire, a community-wide violence, things like that. But what we know from the research is that one thing that we have experienced, every single one of us, is a pandemic. We all experienced the pandemic. We all experienced loss in some shape, form, or fashion. And so we're at a really interesting time right now that we can say that while we all experienced the same storm, we were all in different boats. So while my loss, my grief might look different than Ashton's, that's based on resources. It's based on what tools and resources I have readily available to myself to work through, process that trauma. And so what we're hearing across the country is we're seeing a lot of learning loss that's now showing up, a lot of anxiety, stress with our educators, a lot of burnout with our educators. We're seeing behaviors from students at levels that we were not experiencing pre-pandemic. And so this has kind of created a space where we are starting to talk about trauma. We're starting to talk about the importance of mental health, which is why we're here today, right? So this training kind of addresses that. Then we move into a discussion. Anytime you see this yellow little thing at the bottom right-hand corner, that's where there's a discussion in the training. So what are some things that we're already doing? And so I might actually ask you in the chat box, what are some things that you're already doing on your campus that you would consider trauma informed? Okay, I'm just going to go move on because I think I'm running out of time. But there is a discussion about what are some things we're already doing, and then we kind of add to that toolbox along the way. Everything from changing our language with our students, where if a student maybe has an outburst in class, rather than saying why did you do that, changing our verbiage to ask what happened to you, to learn more about the root and the underlying cause of the behavior or the academic needs. We also touch on in this training about the importance of teaching, reaching the heart before we teach the mind. That connection and those relationships are so essential and truly trauma and grief informed. Then we move into 5 different buckets of trauma informed classrooms information. So being clear, offering compassion, being consistent, building community, and finding ways to connect. We actually spend in this real training about 30 minutes going through these 5 C's and getting down into details on what we can do to be more clear, to be more compassionate, to be more consistent, to build community and to connect. And we also rely on a lot of Dr. Bruce Perry's work. One of my most favorite quotes, trauma is not an excuse for behavior, it's an explanation for it. So this training has been designed with the lens of understanding that there's something going on whenever we're seeing an outburst. Also, when we close out this second session within this training, we outline 5 trauma-informed strategies, and we develop SMART goals that we can take based on all the strategies that are learned. Now, I realized that I did not cover very many, but it's filled with probably 50 different strategies that you would learn to be more trauma and grief informed. Then we would develop a plan for the implementation of these 5 strategies. And then we think about how we might change the way that we show up in our classrooms to be more trauma informed and healing centered. So this training is really designed to think about where we are on your campus, think about what we're already doing, see how that fits in, learn some new strategies, and make a plan for how we're going to move forward. More of what Dr. Bruce Perry tells us is that what works best is anything that increases the quality and number of relationship in a child's life. And Bill Milliken tells us that programs don't change people, relationships do. So at the core of this second session for this training that you all have the opportunity to become trainers in is the development of relationships. And Dr. Bruce Perry also tells us is that resilience cannot exist without hope. It's the capacity to be hopeful that carries us through challenges, disappointments, loss, and traumatic stress. So I'm actually going to stop sharing for just a moment because I think I'm almost out of my time. I just want to review quickly. We ran through a lot of information about pieces and parts of this training that your education service centers are trained to make you trainers in. And what we're about to hear, and actually Ashton's going to introduce, I believe, is a school district and an ESC who's doing this work. And I'm sure you're going to hear more ideas on how to be trauma and grief informed. And I'm also going to put some information in the chat box and my email address. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I will be happy to support you. And I'm going to pass it to you, Ashton.
Hey, awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Natalie. This was some great information and you are definitely sharing some awesome strategies to support our school communities. A big piece of that announcement as well, right? So we have put into the chat a couple of times the write-up that we've done for this particular training that is in our best practices and programs repository. So if you would like to hear more, learn more about this particular training, read up on it, you can definitely go to our best practices and programs repository and check out the write-up on that, as well as contact your ESC region as well. So without further ado, we are actually going to hear from a few, we're going to hear from a panel of a few of our ESC district and campus leaders who are working to roll out this training that Dr. Natalie just showcased, and who are also are implementing trauma and grief-informed care strategies at their campuses and those campuses that they also support. So without further ado, well, let me back up, I'm sorry. As we go through this panel, right, if you all would like to ask our panelists any questions, I just want to highlight that Q&A function as well. So if you want to ask our panelists any questions, please go ahead and put the chat, put your questions in the Q&A function. My colleague Tammy is going to walk us through those Q&A questions with our panel right after we wrap up this particular piece. So again, if you want to ask our panelists any questions, please put those questions in the Q&A function. All right, so without further ado, I want to just give everybody a chance to introduce themselves by telling us your name, your role, and how you are supporting school mental health. And I'll actually start off with Danielle. If y'all know, Danielle is in a really phenomenal space. She calls it her mobile office. So Danielle, I'll start with you to introduce yourself and please also take this opportunity to share about some of the great work that you're doing with your mobile office that you have there.
Okay, you'll have to forgive me. We've got a line of kids outside singing loudly, so excited about that. But this is my mobile office. It is a RV, and it goes around from campus to elementary schools. My district was kind enough to let me raise the money and the funds. I'm sure if you've ever served on campuses, you know, counselors that rove typically end up behind stages or in the nurse's office or in some corner of the library or janitor's closet, storage closets. I've been in all of those locations. I'm a registered play therapist. So in order to get a consistent environment in which to pick up where we left off with kids, I asked for the opportunity to raise funds for a mobile office or a registered play therapy office. And so they have given me that opportunity. And so we raised enough and then gutted it. And then I'm a tier 3 service for the, whenever you're looking at the different levels, I'm a LPC and a tier 3 service. Our school counselors are actually our boots on the ground, and they do a lot of training regarding the brain and regarding all the stuff that they do. They do tier 1, start with the basic this is how the brain works. This is what it is. This is what it means to flip our lid, like like Natalie was talking about earlier. And so they go over those things. And so when we get there, it helps make my job so much easier because they already have the foundation that the school counselors have put forth in that. And so it's a quick rundown. I don't want to waste everybody's time hearing this.
Oh no, not a waste of time at all. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm already seeing the chat. It seems like you're giving a lot of folks some good ideas. So thank you for that. And then I will pass it over to you, Amber, to just introduce yourself, your name, role, and what you do to support school mental health.
Okay, I'm Amber Garza. I'm a 6th grade counselor at Lone Star Middle School in San Angelo. I work directly with students most of the time, and primarily 6th grade, but we have 6 through 8 on campus. We have a reflection room that we use kind of in a similar way to work with students, a sensory room. And I work directly with our MTSS group. Often we meet and talk about students directly and just work with students.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Amber. And then now I'll pass it over to you, Greg, to share about what you do.
Thank you, Ashton. So my name's Greg Hickey, and I too am a licensed professional counselor, and I work at the ESC level. I'm at ESC 15. I asked Danielle and Amber both today to join me. What they didn't brag about, I will. These are CREST Award winning counseling programs, very coveted award in the state of Texas. And so no surprise to me that they jumped right in and wanted to be a part of this. So what I do, I'm the mental health specialist for ESC 15. I'm one of several licensed mental health staff that we have here to offer supports to our school districts. I work primarily with school counselors under a Department of Ed grant. What we do is a grow your own school counselor model. So we have annual cohorts of counselors that are teachers in their district. They want to get their master's in professional school counseling. We provide a stipend for their tuition and some of their salary to get them started in new counselor positions in our district. So we are trying to grow and strengthen that workforce, and we're very excited because in this next year, we are going to add LPC associates to the mix so they can do some boots on the ground work out in our district. So I'm very excited to get that project off the ground, and I'm happy to be here today to answer questions with this wonderful team.
Awesome. Thank you for bragging on Danielle and Amber too. Thank you for that, Greg.
They're humble, and so I've got to brag on them and the
Right.
work those districts are doing.
Right. And then Dominic, my friend, please introduce yourself, your name, role, and what you do to support school mental health.
All right, thank you so much. So my name is Dominic Menino. I am a school counselor over in Marshall, Texas. I work at Price T. Young Fine Arts Academy. We're a K-5 campus. And one of the big initiatives I've started this year to support mental health is for my SELs, all of our K-5 classes, my principal has let me push in and really hit hard some coping skills because we are a high trauma school. We have a lot of students who have to deal with trauma. Sorry, one second.
Teachers and students at this time.
We're also testing today.
At this time, we are done.
True school environment. I love it. We're getting real life here.
Fifth grade, your elective will still be at the end of the day. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Of course, they would wait till I'm speaking. But I adapt a lot of coping skills to depending on the grade level. So for 5th grade, I may actually teach them full-blown progressive muscle relaxation. But for kindergarten, they're not going to be able to even pronounce progressive muscle relaxation. So I've got a short version where we just do it with our hands. We call it the stress squeeze. And I just adapt a bunch of various coping skills to the point where my kindergartners and 1st graders actually call me Mr. Coping Skills when they see me in the hallway. And another thing is I have a really supportive principal when it comes to mental health, which I'm so thankful for. Every semester since I've been here, he has had me do at least one trauma and grief informed like presentation, whether it's just, giving scenario based. Before we started school this summer, there was a really good video I showed. It was like back in the 90s, CBS had done a report on this school in New York where you get to see this student, like the principal tried to de-escalate a situation between a teacher and student. You can tell like all parties, there's something going on. And it all started over a teacher confiscating the student's hat, but just snowballs. And so as I was like showing it to my teachers, I'm like, let's look at this. Like, it's not about the hat was the main phrase of that training. But yeah, I've been able to do a lot of support with them through there, and just I've got a really supportive staff, and it's been phenomenal to work here.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And then I
Yes, and
think
I'll
go
post
ahead.
a link to that video in the chat in just a second.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And now we have Dominic, Mr. Coping Skills Menino now, right, as our name. We'll make sure I put that down for us when we post the recording. So I appreciate too, Dominic, because this is a great segue into like our first question. So Dr. Natalie mentioned, right, that this training around building a practice for educator wellness and trauma-informed classrooms and campuses, right, is a trainer of trainers. And the whole goal and point of it is for our ESCs to be able to provide capacity to folks like yourselves on the call to be able to, of course, train up our educators, everybody on our campus staff around some of these strategies, and as well around like having some educator wellness practices. So this first question, I actually started off with you, Greg, and again thinking about building that capacity, right? So how have you, especially from that ESC level, been working with your districts to be able to plan and on rolling out this the building a practice for educator wellness and trauma and grief informed classrooms and campuses training? So how have you been able to plan out rolling that training out for everybody?
Thanks, Ashton. So I'll start with this. Every ESC is probably going to be different on where they are on this rollout, but having been at that trainer of trainers, there were many ESCs represented there. So you are very likely, if you're on this call, to have somebody at your ESC that serves your school who's been trained to do this. So please do make contact with them and figure out where your ESC is on this. But I can speak to where we are. We're very excited to have begun our rollout. We started slowly so that we can kind of get our feet wet because we too are kind of learning how to provide this training. So we had one training take place in November of this year, and it went very well. Feedback was overall positive, and we have another training set up in April to provide this training to our districts. We're starting out just doing it as a training ourselves so that we can get our feet wet before offering it as a trainer of trainers. So what we've done is we've taken a team approach so that it's not just one person providing this training. We are picking dates where our entire counseling and mental health team get together and introduce ourselves to our audiences, make sure that they know that we as a team are here as an ongoing resource. What I always tell my audiences when I do professional development is just the beginning of a conversation. And I can't stress this enough for y'all. Your ESC should be an ongoing source of counseling and mental health support for you. Again, all ESCs are going to differ in terms of what they offer, but our goal was to get our counseling and mental health team out there in front doing this training together so that we can bring our different experiences with practice into that training. And so, again, the feedback has been excellent. I think it's a wonderful training. I know Dr. Fikach was really pressed for time today. I think she did it justice, but I mean, this is a full day training for us to offer both of these sections, the educator wellness and the student wellness portions. There's a lot of meat in that training, a lot of strategy, and we highly encourage y'all to please reach out. We also, as an ESC, kind of speaking of rolling out, if a district calls us and requests us to come out and do this training, we are absolutely going to do that for them. Most ESCs do travel out to their districts. They like to leave what we jokingly call the cubicle farm. Let's get out there. Let's do this work. Let's get feet on the ground and do these trainings. We have an unofficial model at the ESC. You call, we haul. Like we come out there and we can do this training for you on site as well. So please do reach out to your ESCs and see where they are with the rollout.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Greg. And one thing I kind of want to pull out from what you were mentioning too is like that team approach, right? We kind of noticed as Dr. Natalie was pulling out some of the strategies that there are a lot of processing activities and like ways to actually create plans as well within the training itself. So being able to like have a team of folks to actually support the folks in that training, it seems to be super helpful as well. And Greg, you're supporting Amber and Danielle. So I wanted to see if either of you would like to come off mute and maybe add on to what Greg has been mentioning about being able to roll this training out and provide it on campuses.
Well, I can elaborate on some of the team building thing that you were talking about. I was blessed to start this role in 2020, which doesn't sound like a great blessing. It actually was not COVID that spurred it on, but the year before they had hired that. And so 2019, 2020 ended up being our year. And so we had the opportunity to spend COVID period in Zooms just like this one with my team of counselors, all the school counselors from all the districts. And that was where the game changer was. When we get in there, the way our mental health program works is beautiful and could not be done out of whatever just happened in my head. I needed to respect what was already there and build upon that. And so our team was absolutely phenomenal. I have a team member, Denise, who was always asking, I need you to draw it out. That's not the way my brain thinks. And so I had to work on that. Carrie was asking about processes. What's the process to do this? Blanca said it needs to be done in phases. That's too much to ask for all at once. And so we were able to put our brains together after interviewing other districts who had more experience. And Round Rock, Anna, and there were several that we had the opportunity to Judson had the opportunity to interview and just kind of take notes on what they were doing, and then came back and said, what does that look like in Brownwood? Because we don't have the same resources. That Anna's close to a bigger city that has LPC interns all the time. We didn't have that. But then Judson had different kind of resources, but then we have our own resources. So we said, what does that look like here in our town? Because I think that's where the team, you really need it, because I'm not smart enough to come up with all that. I need other team members to pitch in and see from their perspectives and say, this helps me, that doesn't help, that's too much, how do we do this? And so and to be practical about creating solutions.
Right. Thank you for sharing that.
And I spoke with Greg the other day, and after we had a discussion, we were just kind of talking about this topic in general. I spoke with my principal, and she's also very supportive. We had a conversation. It really kind of opened up a great line of conversation about how all these trainings are important for the teachers. I think that a lot of times the counselors are the ones that get the trainings. And so we're looking for ways to brainstorm. We had a great discussion about why we need to be doing this and specific situations. And so now we're brainstorming ways to get more information to the teachers. We have had some, training for them, but it's never enough, right? So we'll continue with that and talk to Greg and see what we can do for our district and the campus as well.
Amber, a quick highlight too of something that you mentioned about we want to make sure like our teachers, our educators are being able to get trained on this too. As our MHTTC team and Dr. Natalie were developing this training, right? We wanted to make sure that it was accessible to teachers, right? And like we wanted to create real life strategies and walk away from this training with things that you can actually do in your classroom, like tomorrow or maybe even yesterday, right? So I appreciate you uplifting and highlighting that particular piece about this training as well. And then Dominic, I know in your campus, y'all have had a pretty unique approach too to rolling out the training in terms of like how you all have been able to chunk it up a little bit. Do you mind speaking about what that has looked like on your campus?
So we actually I haven't done the entire training with everybody just yet, because while we were supposed to do it a couple weeks ago, there was an emergency at another campus, and I had to go do that. But I've done it with a couple of teachers, and it's been working well with them who've started implementing those practices, as well as something my principal, as soon as I went to the very first trainer of trainers, I came back, presented it to my principal, and he and I actually started implementing some of the strategies ourselves, so that by the time we did present it to the teachers, it was one of those like, hey, we understand we're not going to ask you to do something that we're not going to do, or we're not going to do. That way to maybe kind of like help with the teacher buy-in and help those, you're always going to have the teachers who are skeptical, oh, it's another training. So I know, especially like the morning gratitudes, that has become one of my daily routines that I don't know what I did before it. But my principal's been really good. I actually get when we come back from Christmas, I've got a full day training to like go over everything again with the teachers on just the teacher mental health care. That way we can kind of start off the new year like that. And then we're going to go back over the trauma informed care for the students a couple weeks later.
I big thing, right? We don't want to ask our teachers to do something that we aren't doing ourselves, right? And like
exactly
having that morning meditation, morning announcements, right? Like that organizational wellness leads to our educator wellness. So I appreciate you uplifting that as well, Dominic. Awesome. So hopefully everyone in the audience, you've gotten some great tips on not only what this training looks like in practice, but also how you can actually access it, right? And like bring it to your campus. So kind of transitioning a little bit to really talking a little bit more about what strategies y'all are using on your campuses around trauma and grief-informed care in your work. So how are you all being able to implement some of the trauma and grief-informed strategies, whether it's in maybe like your professional development plans or in like the MTSS framework or structure that you might have for your particular district or campus? What does that look like for you all in terms of being able to embed some of these trauma and grief-informed strategies in your work? And I'll actually start this one off with you, Amber.
Okay, one of the things that we do on my campus is the MTSS is really big. We've rolled that out with our group really hard on our campus first in the district. And so one of the things that we make sure we do after we have a meeting, we have a concern about a student, we have a wraparound meeting the next week or so and talk to all the teachers and get input. We also have a student interview that we actually call the students in our office and work with the students directly and kind of see what's going on and get more information and just honestly communicate with everyone. I think one of the most important things for us on campus is to be accessible for our students. We're here, we have a request to see a counselor form that our students can fill out. It is middle school. It's a Google form. All 3 counselors get an email. After we get that email, we, kind of triage the request. Sometimes there's more than others at once and pull them in and talk to them. But I think communication is one of our main things. And then once we have the MTSS meeting and the wraparound, we have all of our information. We really kind of focus on students having a safe place to be. And like I said earlier, we have the reflection room. We pull them in there. It's a calm environment. And just kind of help with them getting through whatever they need to get through. So it's definitely a group effort. All of our counselors, our instructional coaches, our administrators, and our at-risk coordinator all work together through that process, depending on the grade level of the students and the needs to meet whatever needs there are.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Danielle, would you like to share as well?
Sure. We were able to come up with a multi-tiered system of support as well. And so we utilize our school counselors as our tier 1. They are very intentional about teaching about the brain and the amygdala and the responses of that. We have 4 elementary schools at our district. And so they have horizontally and vertically aligned their curriculum so that they go into depth about that. Then when we have the opportunity to do small groups, whether that be something we now have expanded to where we have a local school that is got social work program. So we utilize them a lot to come up and help teach our small groups and coordinate with our school counselors, give them some of the support that they need. And then on a tier 3 level, they get referred to myself or my cohort Leah. My cohort Leah serves the secondary campuses. And so she goes around with those We've been blessed to have be a recipient of the HELP grant with Greg, and so we've gotten to expand grow our own, and we're continuing to grow our own into LPCs. And then we also have been blessed to get the innovative services for students with autism, which has allowed for a ton of training for our teachers. And anytime I talk about what autism looks like with training, I will also throw in how similar grief and because they're already getting paid they get paid extra to go to this autism training. And so when they do that, I go ahead and throw in how grief and trauma mirrors some of the same things and how that can look different in the different ones, so that we don't have just like every student being diagnosed with autism. That's not the goal. That they can be able to differentiate. We spend a lot of time talking about what the function of the behavior is. What's the function? And now we're able to, I'm excited because next week we're having a meeting with the assistant principals and talking about being very intentional about identifying function whenever it comes to tier 3 behavior, and very intentional regarding positive behavior interventions with tier 2 especially. So
thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Dominic, yourself.
Okay. So tier 1 and 2 usually falls in my ball court. Tier 1 being, just the general students with me pushing out the coping skills. Another thing our principal did, he did this right before I got here that I love. All classrooms have what we call the calm down corner, where it's got a bean bag. It's got, I actually have some stuff over here, a little flip book of like emotions, where if a kid's not feeling verbal that day, they can like look at the corner, see which emoji they are feeling, point to it, and we discuss that. But every classroom is equipped with that, some like sensory stuff. So the teachers are also able to like handle if it's not anything too major to where I can't get to it. For some of our tier 2 and tier 3 students, we usually consider that in their IEPs. Our SPED coordinator and I are right down the hall from each other. We stay in constant communication. We make sure that if they're a tier 2 or tier 3, we like document that and add that to either the 504 or IEP, and just do what we can to make sure all students are getting that support.
Thank y'all for sharing that. I think like to kind of summarize what I kind of heard from all three of you on that campus level, right? While y'all are doing some like really phenomenal strategies, a couple of things that I heard big time, right, is y'all are doing a great job of being able to identify the students that might need some supports, and even like on that tier 1 level, doing a few different strategies to be able to teach skills that can prevent some of these like big things from like popping up in the future. And then also a whole lot of collaboration and teaming that's kind of going on at that level to be able to make sure students are getting the supports they need after they've been identified. So thank y'all for sharing that. And I know, Greg, you being at the ESC level might have a little bit of a different perspective. So I'm wondering, do you have any strategies or even like particular programs that you might want to uplift that when you're working with your school districts, you kind of gear them towards or suggest a few things for them?
Sure. So just as individual districts and campuses may have MTSS teams, we too have an MTSS team that can help our districts learn some new frameworks for addressing student behavior, student academics. I work, hand in hand with them a lot of different behavior trainings. And so I recommend, please do, again, contact your ESC, see if they have an MTSS team available who can help you with things like the emergent tree framework. We also have a statewide grant for the PACS Good Behavior game, which kind of stands outside of most MTSSs, but does fit in that framework. So lots of great resources out there that your ESC may have access to. So please make friends with them. One thing that we do at the ESC level as well is try to keep just a rotation of trainings on a variety of mental health subjects available to our districts. So right now, we've actually developed a what to do lunch and learn series because we know that educators, especially when school is in session, don't have a lot of time to just attend full day training. So this is literally an hour at lunchtime to learn about what to do about a certain mental health topic, whether it's challenging behaviors, suicide intervention, self-injury, anxiety. In fact, Ashton, I can send you the flyer. Y'all are more than welcome to attend. Our friends statewide, we'd love to have you there. So really just at the ESC level, making sure that we provide in some of those trainings, things to do at each tier of MTSS. And so, you know, and working hand in hand with our MTSS team here at the ESC as well.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Greg. And earlier, you started this conversation off with giving kudos and praise to Danielle and Amber. And I want to make sure I give you kudos and praise, as well as all of our ESC friends that are supporting school mental health for walking with alongside and with our school districts to be able to support the implementation of school mental health all across our state of Texas. So I want to give you your praise and kudos, my friend, while we're here.
On behalf of ESCs, I appreciate it. It's been a joy of my career, seeing this work, coming from community mental health myself into education. Also, right at the start of the pandemic in February of 20, I don't think I've ever been as proud of a group of people in my life as our Texas educators. So it's great to walk alongside them.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and thank all of our ESC friends. So I think we also had a few questions earlier on today about, you know, making sure we're getting leadership buy-in, and I think all of you have kind of mentioned having like some pretty phenomenal principals and administrators that are willing to walk with you and make sure that you are given the time, space, you know, though resources might be limited, you know, at least some resources to do your work. But for others, right, might not be necessarily so fortunate. And one thing that we know is the more we're able to give like concrete examples of like the success and the benefits of the type of work that we do, the better we are in terms of being able to get these resources, get the administrator buy-in. So, you know, for the sake of all of our friends here on the call, I would love if you all might be able to give like a success story or an example of a time you were able to work with a student through something related to trauma or grief. And this might be the type of story that some of our friends on this call might be able to share up with their administrators to possibly get some buy-in going forward as well. I'm actually going to start off with you, Dominic.
All right. So for me, it kind of relates to this is an incident that happened last year, and it's actually why I hit coping skills so heavy at the start of this year. So it was last year I had a student who I was picking up from class because she had requested to talk to me because she was having some issues. Well, as she was leaving the class, something had happened and the teacher started yelling at her, like a big raised voice. Well, this student had had a traumatic past where she had been assaulted by a family member, and the yelling it sent her back to that place. And so as I was waiting in my office, I'm like, hey, this student hasn't come down yet. So as I start making my way back up, I caught her in our 5th grade stairwell, just on the steps, full-blown panic attack, struggling to breathe, face red. So I just sat down beside her and we did some sensory grounding. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things you can feel, or 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell. And then because taste is weird, because you're not usually tasting something in the middle of a panic attack, I usually ask them, like, let's just imagine your favorite flavor pizza, something like that. And I went through that with her a couple times, and she was able to calm down enough to come back to my office. We were able to sort through what set her off, and then we were able to talk about what happened that day, or what she originally wanted to talk about, and just the way I saw it help her calm down. And then a couple days later, she actually came back to my office really excited, saying that she had a friend in class who was having a breakdown, and she used what I used with her, and she was able to help her friend by using the sensory grounding. So kind of seeing that, it was already kind of spreading through, that's when I decided, okay, so it sounds like coping skills needs to be my big push. And so that's what I've been trying to push this year, and it's been working really. We've actually seen a massive reduction in referrals this year, and a big reduction in office referrals, emergency button pushes. It's a lot better than it was last year, and it's continuing to improve.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your work. Oh man, Amber, you seem a little impacted by that. You're like, ooh. I'm gonna actually pass it over to you to go ahead and share if you'd like to as well.
Well, I found some similarities, I think, between Dominic's story and mine. I have a student that I had since the 6th grade. She's an 8th grader now. She came into my office in the 6th grade and reported that she had been assaulted by a family member. We obviously got the police involved, and so as a result of that conversation, her entire life changed. The family dynamic changed. Everything about her life changed. And her 6th grade year was really, really tough. I was actually just last week writing a nomination for a student tribute award for her. So it's kind of fresh. But she every effect of trauma that I can think of, that I'm aware of, it happened to her. And she was already in the special education program. I mean, but she struggled academically a little bit, but after that, it was just everything changed, and her academics were in the hole. And she started coming in regularly. We had her up in the reflection room, talked to her, just kind of went through all the coping strategies that I knew to do. But I don't want to downplay the effects of outside services. I had her in small groups. I had her in individual counseling. She was in my office multiple times a day, but ultimately, we reached out. Guardian had some concerns about having her in outside counseling, just maybe retelling the story. But we got the Children's Advocacy Center involved, and she now is an 8th grader, and she walks down the hall with a level of confidence that I'd never seen before. I mean, she's just a new person. And our principal, we had a choir concert the other night, and our principal sent our counseling group a picture of her at the choir concert. And it was just one of those really emotional times, from knowing that, this is where it all worked. I mean, it all came together. The principal was involved, the other counselors were involved, but I am the only female counselor on my campus, and so she just felt more comfortable with me. And so now when I see her in the hallway, it's a hi, and a smile and happiness, and I could just remember where she was in the 6th grade. And so there's definitely success stories from all of these practices. And but the outside counseling also we were very thankful to have that. And she did play therapy too, Danielle, so that I know that was it's really helpful. Thank y'all.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Amber. Danielle, would you like to share?
I love what she said about coordinating with the outside people. I would highly recommend, like, we get memorandums of understanding with some of our outside service providers, and we also have a consent for disclosure, just handy. And so one of the things that we highly encourage our providers that we do have in the area to maintain that open communication with our school counselors. And so we can say, hey, this is how they're doing at school. Not that we want to get in all their business to understand all the details of their therapy, but if there's something big, like they're going to maybe go back to living with mom, and that's a big thing for them, or if they're getting a major med change, just for us to be able to handle that with care and a little bit of support, and help give the educators the information needed to help support them well, without getting into all the nitty gritty, just treating them with a little bit of grace whenever we're doing med changes, or if we know that there's something big that's coming on, so that we can just empower our teachers to be positive supports, instead of just flying blind.
Right. Thank you all for sharing it. Even like being able to know what your own capacity was and refer out when you needed to, right? Like, I think that's something like huge, and that's a piece of like building out our school mental health systems, is being able to build up that infrastructure. And I bet a lot of us on this call today can think of a student that we've come across at one point or another in our work, that's probably dealt with some trauma or some grief, right? And even taking the cases that you all mentioned, those students, right, they were able to get a little bit extra support from their school, and now they're on a path to healing. They're on a journey to success, and who knows where they would be if they would not have been able to get access to the help they needed. from their school. So I just want to say thank you all for that work that you all do. And before I give it to Tammy to open us up for the audience Q&A, I just want to do a quick whip around. So if y'all could take like 15 to 20 seconds, just closing thoughts for this portion. If you had colleagues on this call right now who might be in early adoption or even just exploration of really being able to build out their school mental health systems, or even just focusing in on trauma and grief-informed care in their school communities. So they're early adopters, just exploration maybe. What advice would you give them if you had like, again, 15 to 20 seconds just to give somebody some quick advice, knowing what your journey has looked like, and they might be early on. I'm gonna go ahead and actually start it off with Greg, especially given you support so many school districts.
Yeah. So I'm going to take my time, hopefully 20 seconds, to address a big question that was in the chat earlier, and that is buy-in and getting buy-in. I think that approaching administrators, and it's going to take a little bit of vulnerability, but maybe being honest about some of your struggles with trauma. You don't have to give details, but there's a reason why you are probably the one concerned about administrative buy-in. As an educator, what do you and your colleagues struggle with? And be very vulnerable and honest with the admin about that, and the need to have somebody come in and at least start the conversation. And yes, some teachers are going to look at this as just another training. I think we look at it as the start of a conversation, and any decent trainer worth their salt is going to come in and they're going to treat this as a conversation about you guys and your school and what you guys are dealing with. The training is a wonderful, beautiful, well-crafted framework for a conversation. And I think that that's how we need to frame it with admin.
Thank you for sharing that, Greg. It's about a conversation. I love that. Dominic, a few seconds if you had to give some suggestions to our early adopters.
Along with the, approaching administration, I would just say evidence-based practice. I am all about supporting with evidence and documentation. In fact, this training, whenever I presented to my principal, he was already buying in. But when I mentioned that some of the techniques I remember that our region presenters mentioned were developed by Dr. Sood, who did a lot of work with the U.S. military, and a lot of the trainings that are in this presentation were actually developed originally with the U.S. military and with those troops, and helping them with their PTSD during, I believe it was the Middle East War around the early 2000s is when that was, or is when he did that work, somewhere around there. But just kind of mentioning that, it's like, hey, there's evidence to this. It's been done outside of schools. It's been done. They found success in the military with this. I know that helped with my principal, even though he did already bought in. And that's helped with teachers. It was like, okay, this isn't just a fluff for fun, pat ourselves on the back thing. This is actual evidence, and these are actual things that work.
Yep. It's just not a bunch of rainbows and bunnies, right?
Yes.
It's like some actual content, some actual work. There are a few Dr. Sood quotes and activities embedded all throughout this particular training. So thank you for uplifting that, Dominic. Amber, I'm gonna have you go.
Mine would be to build relationships with the students, with the administrators, with the powers that be, with outside resources. Just build relationships. We have at the beginning of the year, we do a minute meeting with our students and ask questions, do you feel safe? Things like that, very early in the school year. And it kind of guides our path after that. I think that's important. I'm definitely an introvert. And so sometimes that's a little harder for me to build relationships, but I obviously realize the importance of it.
Thank you for sharing. And then Danielle, I'm sorry, Danielle, you can wrap us up.
Okay, and to kind of piggyback on what Amber's saying, that relationship is important and it takes time to do that. So give yourself grace whenever it comes to time. It's going to take a long time, and you're going to get little baby steps, and you're going to get frustrated because they won't let you in the front door, but you'll come in a window or the back door or the side door or the chimney. You'll figure out a way in. It's just don't give up and give yourself plenty of time. It just takes time.
Thank y'all so much for indulging me in this conversation and sharing so much to the folks on this call and throughout our state, right? And I know we're wrapping up, so Tammy, you probably have about 5 to 7 minutes or so to pull out some questions from our audience today.
Sure. One question that I saw multiple times was if anyone could talk a little bit more about some of the interventions that you may have provided at the secondary level. Maybe pull out kind of your favorite or your go-to or something that you've really seen successful, but we had a few that were hungry for more secondary. And I'm looking at you, Amber.
Okay, I was like, I think I'm the only secondary. We do just a lot of small groups. It's not necessarily like one program or anything like that. We do use the Capturing Kids' Hearts program amongst all of our students. And you know, that's a program that our district bought, but just a lot of different books. I wish I had one thing that I could say, hey, this is a perfect one, but I don't. It's kind of like pull it from here, pull it from there, and put it all together. But if somebody else has something more specific, I'm ready to hear it.
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. There were several different questions about the training that Dr. Feacock talked about, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate. Each ESC should have a master trainer, like Greg had talked about. So please contact your ESC. I know there's a lot of questions about how do I become a trainer. That is how. Go through your ESCs, ask about that specific training and when that train availability is and those things, and then kind of go from that route. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, Greg. I know you had mentioned that before, so I just wanted to reiterate. That's how you get it.
I think you covered it well. Please do reach out to your ESC. I mean, you can reach out to me too, and I will help you identify who it is at your ESC that's the master trainer for you. And then you can kind of start a conversation with them about getting somebody out to train your district. We really are excited about pushing this out, and that's what ESCs do. We're here to support educators in everything that you do. So I always joke, I always say, you know, if you've heard that phrase, there's an app for that. At an ESC, there's a staff for that. There's somebody here that's able to help you with whatever your problem is. So if you don't know where to start with your ESC's reception staff and move from there.
I love that. Love that. Thank you so very much for that. I know another kind of summarizing a few of the questions that were there, and I know you kind of touched on it a little while ago too. I just want to make sure that they got their question answered. Was the pushback from administrators, and I want to kind of even add to that. In your process of doing these interventions and putting together kind of putting together the things that you learned in the training into your schools, how did you handle any pushback, whether it be from admin, parents, other teachers, staff? Is there any kind of golden nugget advice that you could give for those who are experiencing pushback?
Can I jump in or?
Please, please.
Natalie earlier said it best with data. If you have data to show that what you're doing is working, there will be nothing to push back on. So we collect data on everything we do. At the beginning of our guidance sessions, we do a pre-test, a post-test at the end, and collect that data and have that data to support what we're doing.
Excellent. Anybody else want to?
And I'm also, I think Amber mentioned earlier too, building the relationships too, because I know with a lot of my teachers, I can go up to them and say, hey, I want to try out this new thing in your classroom. And because I've built that relationship with them, they're like, oh yeah, sure, just let me know what it is. So but that's only because I've cultivated that relationship. I've gotten to know them, and kind of like also Amber mentioned, I also have the data with that. So the data and the relationships definitely go hand in hand.
Thank you. And I know there were many questions that were very detailed as far as asking to repeat the names of the books. I think there was some about trainings. And so I would just encourage the panelists to share that. I love that. Thank you, Danielle. The elastic. Oh, fantastic. Elastic brain. I love it. I encourage the panelists to please feel free to share any of the resources that you've mentioned today with Ashton. And to those who are participants of the webinar, those will be posted and available to you at the school mentalhealthtx.org. So I know because it was several several questions about that. One other question, and then tell me how I am on time, Ashton, was someone was curious about the student counselor ratio for each of your school districts.
I know for me, it's currently me versus 500 plus students. So definitely double the ASCA recommendation.
Ours is about 1 to 300 for our campus. I'm not sure about the district.
Okay, thank you.
Our campuses are sitting at 1 to 500 for the elementary campuses, except for our small elementary is 1 to 350. Sixth grade and up is at 1 to 250. That doesn't include myself and my cohort Leah. And we are blessed right now to have 4 part-time and 1 full-time counselors supporting students with autism through our innovative services with autism grant. This is the last year of that grant. I anticipate that will go away, but those primarily serve the students with autism. And then we have currently 3 interns, 2 bachelor's level from Howard Payne University and 1 master's level from Angelo State University, helping out to mitigate our campuses with 1 to 500 ratios.
Wow. Okay, that is awesome.
And I can speak to the 47 districts we serve. Like the 1 to 350 to 500 is not uncommon for a mass majority of them. They are very, very high in rural West Texas.
Awesome.
One very specific question that can be answered very, very quickly. We have someone that just wants to kind of reiterate what levels you are at as far as the level of students you serve.
Our campus is 6 through 8, and I work primarily with the 6th graders.
I am district-wide support. There's 3,500 students here, and my cohort primarily focuses on the secondary level, and so she goes in and provides counseling for 6 through 12. And as an LPCA, she consults with me whenever that's going, but if there's any crisis involvement or anything like that after hours or training like that, then I serve in those capacities as well.
I'm K through 5 campus. I just service all the general ed students and special ed students in our K through 5 campus. And I saw I had a question asking me about the Dr. Suits training. I'll post a link to his website, and it just has all of his different resources and different trainings that he's done.
Thank you. Really fast, Ashton. I'm gonna take one more second. Sandy had asked about Danielle about the tier 3 services, and then her question was, do you get parental permission, or is this required?
Yes, I always get parental consent. I find that it's best if they meet me. A lot of times whenever you go and you hear the idea of mental health or counseling, it seems very just intimidating until you meet this goofball, and then you're like, yeah, it's fine. And so and then especially I like for them to have the opportunity to see this and to see the security measures that we have in place as well, so that they know that their student will be safe in my hands. I always say that safe adults don't ask kids to keep secrets. I can't say anything, but they're welcome to tell whatever they want to. And so we go over that. But I think that once you meet me, it's not quite as intimidating, but it can be ominous to have that big thing. But yes, in protection of my license, I have to get consent.
Thank you all panelists for the Q&As, and I'm going to hand it back over to Ashton to kind of wrap us up.
Yeah, thank you all again for taking the time out to be a part of this learning experience for everyone. There are folks all across the state and that learned from you all today, and that wouldn't have been able to help. That wouldn't have been able to happen without you all taking the time out for us. So thank you all. Just really quickly, Tammy, you could pull up the post survey. Everyone, we are, because of our funders, we are having a post survey that has been posted in the chat. You can also use the QR code as well. We will be providing CPE credits for everyone who attended the full training today, and we'll make sure we send that out by the end of the week into early next week, if possible. And again, we have put all of the survey link in the chat, and we will post all of our resources as well. And then I'm gonna turn it over to you, Jerlene, to give us our last little final message before we get out.
Absolutely. So you guys can subscribe to the TEA Mental and Behavioral Health newsletter by using the link, and I'm going to drop that in the chat as well. And by selecting the Mental and Behavioral Health tab to get to that. And you can also select other TEA topics that interest you, and we will continue to provide you with information and future dates of webinar sessions in our newsletter.
Thank you so much, Darlene. You all were phenomenal. And as soon as you finish your post survey, you can go ahead and hop off. But again, we appreciate and thank you all for joining today.